In Jesus' name, amen. So, just want to give a little bit of announcements in that the first 2 weeks of July, we will be closed on Wednesday night because we're preparing for Summerfest, or it's near the 4th of July and all that. And then the next week is Summerfest. And so Summerfest will be the 11th through the 14th, I believe, if I got those dates right in my brain, of July. And that'll be out on our property. So we also won't be having Saturday night service here. So I just keep reminding everybody of that because it's important that we note that, so you don't, first of all, show up here and go, where is everybody? Does the rapture happen? No. So be that. But we also don't want you to miss out on the cool things that are happening. So Thursday night, the first night, there is a Russian praise group that's going to be coming. They've been here, very anointed of God, and that'll be a worship night from probably 7 to who knows when. We say 7 to 9, but, however. And so, and then Friday night, Calvin and Brian Holly will be with us that night. Saturday night is when Terry Francis from Teen Challenge will be with us. And he's already announced he's hoping to wrangle about 50 guys that he wants there in case, they want to have fun and then show up to share any testimonies or whatever. So, and then some women from Teen Challenge North may be coming down, which I'm kind of excited about that too. So, that's a new facility that they have there, and they're just wonderful people. And so he's not coming to talk about Teen Challenge. If you were here on a Saturday night, the power of God is on this man. And so then Sunday morning, Nate Suppan will be with us. We just ministered with him, Jim and I. And Steve Eckholm ministered with him at Malacca Miracles. So that was just on Monday night. And once again, his story is a story of recovery. He's going to share that in about a half an hour. And then we'll see where the service goes from there. He was a man who got into a vehicle while he was high and took off with it, and there was a child in the back. So that's all I'll tell you. You'll have to show up to hear the rest. So in between that, you look at the flyer, it'll say like 3 o'clock things start on Saturday, and after service on Sunday morning we're under a great big tent. And after the food and everything, when it talks about activities, that's zip line, that's, pool, that's the big water slide, that sometimes it's all about the kids, other times it's definitely about the adults slamming their bodies down a hill into 2 mattresses that are at the bottom. The first few years we did that, we're like, we probably should have had something at the end. So they just kept going off into the trees. But so then we discovered, maybe we should put something down there. So we did that, and so you kind of slam into it because it's quite a ways down. And just big 50-foot water slide and jumpers and all kinds of stuff, lots of fellowship and just fun stuff. And there will be some food for sale besides all the other food, and on certain occasions. So we'll announce when that is, and there might just be snacks that'll be sold, or ice cream, or whatever. And then we're seeing if a couple of vendors will come in with some Christian goods that are, more like hats and things like that they're selling. So we're still waiting on some of that. If you have a collector car, bring it. People like to look at that, or motorcycles or whatever. It's kind of fun. This will be on our property, and so, on our home property. Yeah, so it gets interesting. We shut 2 churches down, and we'll have that. And the address for that is online, or it is on the flyers that are waiting out there. So, no, it would be the 11th through the 14th is those dates, and I'll get with you on that because each person at the houses too will let them know how that's going to work. So I wanted to take the time to be able to talk about that. Now, in the future on Wednesday nights, we do something here called Health Matters, and Health Matters is kind of what it says. Health does actually matter, but then we'll be talking about the matters of health. So the Lord gave me that name a long time ago. And so we are looking this year to bring in nurses, doctors, whoever, EMTs, to share their stories or see, when it comes to recovery or it comes to physiological things that we need changed. It's such a blessing. We had Dr. Westerberg come in one time and just spoke on alcoholism, and it was so good. Kim Wessel, an RN, came in and talked about the effects of vaping. We're going to have her come back and do that because we have all kinds of new people. So thanks for coming out tonight. It gets a little bit sparser crowd, but we don't care. We'll speak to the one, right, or to the 1,000. So tonight we are scheduled to talk about the fear of change. So let's not be afraid of that. Isn't it? You know, when you look at that and you think, like we talked about last time, if someone makes the announcement to you that you shouldn't be afraid, well, what happens if you already are? That jacks over the brain's processor. Did you know that? You're like your computer and your brain just goes. It's kind of like saying you should be over that, or you shouldn't feel that way is another one that the brain can't compute because it's looking at the underside of the brain gets very hot, trumps the top part of the brain, and now suddenly your emotional state is ruling your logical state, right? When that happens, some people call that being triggered or whatever. It's an actual thing. Although some people will use the word trigger just when they want to get out of something. I'm being triggered, they want to get out of something, whatever. But if you're truly triggered, you're in a whole different emotional state, and it's real to you, right? So it's not a time for excuses. It's like, I'm feeling it. And so PTSD, all of those different anxiety disorders or operations in the brain, that will be one of those things where you'll know if you're triggered, because it's very difficult for a person, and everything is on a spectrum, but if you're on a higher end of spectrum and you get caught in a PTSD focus moment, what will happen is it's so real to you, you'll feel like you're separated from everyone else in the world, and this is the only person it's happening to right here, right now. It's very difficult at that point for people to just say, hey, knock it off, or, just look at me, and you should be able to get over this, or whatever. As you know, it doesn't just go away, right?
I was just going to say, the only thing, if you can't leave the scenario that's causing the panic attack, it's impossible to calm down. You have to basically go for a walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be by yourself a little bit.
And the other part we talked about is you got two little glands sitting on your kidneys, right? They're just tiny, but if they go off, that's your adrenal glands. Epinephrine hits your system, it's explosive. This is where little grandmas can pick up a car and move it off to somebody. You're like, how did they do that? It's because it's that powerful in the system. So sometimes to come off of something you're afraid of, you have to get the adrenaline out. So walking is huge, breathing, making sure you're breathing and things like that, huge. Because if you stop in that, even if you breathe this way, your brain interprets that, I guess you're dying. You have to be able to get oxygen that makes your stomach rise and fall. Right? And you drag it out, and it's like you're calling yourself back to a place that's just revved up, and you feel like you can't control it. It's a wild horse, right? So you're trying to rein the wild horse in. So I'm saying all that, not because we're just going to be talking just about that here tonight. Tonight's subject is fear of change. So there's two types of change we're going to talk about. The change you initiate and the change other people initiate around you that you actually didn't ask for. If a company shuts down, like you go to work, I don't got anxiety, there's nothing. Whatever. Company shuts down and all of a sudden they make that announcement to everybody. That's not a change you initiated. That's a change someone else initiated. So and you can interpret that as like, oh, here's the change. If it's something you're like, I've been through changes like this before, I can walk through this, no biggie. All of those different kinds of feelings can be there. But in the end, if you didn't initiate it, or if you didn't initiate it, it's going to be one of those things that's come at you in a way that suddenly your brain says this is unpredictable. Because if that can happen, then anything can happen. So what's going to happen next? So if you suffer any form of anxiety, that's that button pusher that starts poking at it. Even if it has nothing to do with your job, it has nothing, let's say that's the change, has nothing to do with that. You actually have anxiety from maybe sexual abuse or things that have happened in the past. It's so different than the subject of the change that's happening at work. But that change that's happening at work will trigger everything you have unresolved. Now, nothing feels safe. I don't trust anybody. Anybody here know what I'm talking about? You've experienced that? So this is what statistics say. I've asked people before, tell me the most stressful thing, and some people will say it's a hurricane, it's, something like that, tsunami just hit this. Yeah, those are really stressful things. But in everyday life, the biggest thing is change. When they go to pick the top thing. In fact, when I saw the psychological review that they had just by testing people and stuff, a rape or a beating or something like that is actually here and changes here. Doesn't that seem like you're like, no, it's changing? Well, here's part of the reason why. When that happens, of course, it happens with these other results. People feel like they've had a loss of control over all. Rather than there was an event, there's a loss of control overall. And if I can't find an area where I have some control, it's hard. But then you add with it like a move, for instance, is listed as one of the top things that hits your neurological center. You guys know what I'm saying? Yeah. Coming from Idaho, you're like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's something about that because your subconscious, like when you came in here tonight, if it's your first time here, you've already recorded the color of the chairs, what the ceiling looks like. Now, if I ask you, close your eyes, and I ask you what's going on, you probably would say, I don't know if I'm going to know that because I really wasn't paying attention. But your subconscious was. It recorded through your 5 senses. Whether you're comfortable in your chair, that was already recorded. Whether you like the tone of my voice, recorded. So, but if I ask you the question, your conscious mind, your frontal lobes go, what? I don't know, what were they, brown or gray chairs? I don't remember. Right? And plus, we don't record where we come into a room and we're like, okay, I have to pick everything up before I can talk to anyone because I'm trying to see the color of the carpet. Where it's all peripheral. It's all, you're just seeing it. You're picking it up as you go. Right? So when you live somewhere, when you first live there, find your way to the bathroom at night, you don't have a routine. There could be some stubbing of the toes and things like that happen on the way over there. You have to find a pattern. There's something, you're out of sorts when you move because it's like, I had all different sounds. Like our old furnace used to make a clicking sound. And you know what I'm saying? And you knew when the air conditioner kicked in or what. My husband is so sound sensitive in our house. And then, I don't know, he's vibe sensitive. It's kind of funny because our children have teased him over the years because he can be sleeping and all of a sudden he'll sit up and he'll go, the lights are on in the kitchen. And he can't see that the lights are on, but it's like he can sense it. Electricity is being used. And he's very, he very much watches that kind of, and thank God that he does, right? He knows the meters, he's watching all that stuff because he's like, I don't want money leaking out just anywhere just because. So he knows temperature change, and we'll be laying in bed sometimes, he'll be like, shh. And then he'll say, okay, that doesn't sound right. And I'm like, I didn't hear nothing. And then he'll get up and he'll check some, I don't know, furnace or whatever. Then he'll come back, well, that was the thing that did that, And he's got that all recorded. Now, we've been living there for 20 years. If we moved, we would have to re-record everything. Right? So all those 20 years of pathways that we grew around a place that you think about, but you don't think about. Now, the reason he thinks about that is highly important to him. I try to make it important to me, but it is on the back area. Like, it's in the back file. I'm like, yeah, I'll look at that when I get a chance because I got these other important things. And I know that that's his zone, right? So what happened to him, I'd have to come up into that zone a whole lot more. And I'm very sensitive to vehicles, though. I grew up just being like, vehicle sounds are like music to me. That's how I record them. I know our Traverse sounds totally different than, my truck, which sounds totally different than Vern's truck. And when I look at, when I can sense something's wrong, I can have the radio playing and still hear what's going on and be like, something's not right. Because the song changed. Right? It's the sound of it changed. And I'm acclimated to my truck now. The muffler needs to be fixed, and it sounds like a Harley when it comes on. And I'm like, oh, I like that. I do. My friend's like, if we don't fix it, it's going to get really loud. I'm like, how long can we wait before we fix that? That's a really good, I like that sound. So, and so I would really know, because I know exactly, I can hear it in my head right now, if something changes. So we learn to record things in our pathway. And I did that with no stress, no trauma over the years, tractors, things like that on the farm. You had to know what was happening by their sound. And then there's the feel if something's wrong. And if you're not trained to record some of those things, your subconscious records them, but there's no understanding. That's why sometimes I will ask ladies when they're asking for help with a vehicle, and I'll say, how long have these lights been on? The warning lights, the ones that you're like, and they're like, I don't know. Or some will say, it's probably been a year. I don't know. You might have wanted to get some things checked then. But there's not a sensitivity to it. There's not an importance that was drawn to that. So those are things we record like that we should record and kind of keep track of, right? Because it helps keep us safe. It keeps the blessing rolling. It's all that. But now what if attention was drawn to sounds, tastes, sight, all your senses because of trauma, and it came at you really loud? Something was subtracted from you. You felt violated or whatever. And it was a loud thing. A loud touch can be rape, right? Did you know the word rape means unwanted touch? So people who have had unwanted touch really don't like if you touch their shoulder, because it's recorded loud inside of them. They don't want to hear anything like that sound ever again. They don't have that feeling ever again. And all you do is say, hey, how are you? And they're like, phew. They go stiff. Don't touch me. Right? That comes out of the recording. So now you take those recordings with you when your whole atmosphere is changing, like move from Idaho to here. It's fun to begin with because your brain tells you you're on some kind of vacation or you're just trying something new. I remember for 6 months, we lived in our house after living in Colorado for 20 years and living here. And it was kind of like we kept saying, even our kids were saying, it feels like we're going to go home one day and be like, thanks for letting us use this house, or whatever, and go back to where you were before. But then you realize you cannot go back. So forces change that's initiated by you can also have change that's initiated by your surroundings. So go back to the rule I always talk about. All crisis demands change. A tornado, if it hits your property, it's not asking permission. It's not giving you options. It will demand change, right? But all change demands decision. Because of the change, you have to make decisions. But if you don't know the options you have available, that's what will send you back into crisis mode. We have to have choices. So when we're working somebody through something traumatic, or you're going through it yourself, you have to kind of back up the train and go, I'm looking at the fact that we're going through this change, so that's probably why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, right? I'm getting a little more edgy if you're going through that or whatever. I cry easily about stuff. I get mad easily about stuff. That's what change can do for elderly people sometimes. Moving from one end of the nursing home to the other, they can pass away. It's too much change. See, so there's something about then having that person or having some of the trainings to be able to say, hey, what's your options when this happens? One of the first things that happens when I deal with people who are suffering homelessness is not give them a speech about what they should do. Let's take a look at your options, because the first thing we're trying to get you to is get to safety. We have to have safety. You can't problem solve until you feel safe. You're staying in a constant thing of trauma. You have to feel safe. So let's say moving wasn't so traumatic, someone's attacking you, whatever. No, you just moved, but you still have to feel safe. Right? And finding a pattern of it's that part of the coffee shop, and I figured out Walmart, and all of those different things. Suddenly you start to feel a little bit more safe because you've practiced a routine that's forcing your mind, yes, to go through change, but it's also setting up a recording that says, we'll be all right. I know where stuff is. It's in the simple things. Right? So you may still be practicing the simple things. If you left friends behind when you moved. I know so-and-so, this is our grocer person, this is, whatever our mailman looked like. It doesn't matter. Those are people that were familiar. Now you have to familiarize with all kinds of people. Now here's what's wild about me. I've always had a lot of change. Now, we stayed on the farm for many years. Many years for me was 17, and I moved away. And so, but I mean, that was all my cognitive, age of directive stuff that we've talked about. Most of that came when I was on the farm. But I also knew gangster stuff. You got farmers and you got gangsters, and I had my uncle would drive in with all kinds of motorcycles, and they were the highwaymen. So they came in. That was a whole different culture. So I was this culture, that culture, the other culture. My dad being native, my mother being German, two different cultures, right? They were raised two different ways. So lots of change, and you have to adapt to it. So it's probably a little bit more easier for me now to be like, hey, let's go to Mexico and minister, or let's go up to Red Lake. I'm good. I don't need a whole team either, and I'm good. That's why my personality is a little bit more like that. But asking someone to come to a mission trip or something like that, there's a big bunch of change that will go on the inside of you if you're used to staying in a zone, right? This is my zone that I stay in. Anything that's new to the mind has to be recorded, and it has to be filtered, and it has to be sorted, and you have to know what your options are. And that's all fine and good when there's no trauma attached to it. Amen? Can you turn the side air conditioner on? Sometimes this one doesn't cut it the same. I can kind of feel it up in here. So any case, we have to understand this when we're looking at change, because change has to happen. And there will always be an initiation from the world toward us, and there'll be initiating for us to know, hey, this is what I feel my destiny is, so I'm going to initiate it out this way. The challenge is there every single time, though, when you're trying to initiate something new from your side out. And there's a different challenge when it initiates it this way, out to in. Now, we can feel more traumatized, of course, because if something initiates it out here, we feel like, what are you doing with my life? I don't think I want the company to change. I don't know that I should have to move. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's like you'll feel any victim part of you. Remember I said if you feel like a victim in any area, everything else is a bully. So if your boss says this is the way the company's going, whether he can help it or not, you'll feel like, That's when people come home and they'll be like, I don't know that job, and they promised this. And we'll complain about all kinds of stuff that maybe the job doesn't even have control over. Because we're mad. We're like, that's forcing me to change. Sometimes people come to church and they'll push, we call it pushing off. Like when we did foster care, if a child was with us for any amount of time and they did really well, when they found out it was time to go back to their family or something like that, they would push off. And push off meant like, I have to find everything wrong with you now because I can't just leave you and go through the change and go back to this other. I don't want to do that. So you have to be mean and you have to be whatever. And they would never do it until about 2 weeks before it was time for that change. And so begin with, we didn't understand that. And after a while, we were like, hey, here we go. Bring it on, And then so the whole time you hold the line, I love you. Yep, I'm going to come visit you. It's going to be okay. You can come here for respite if you need, blah, blah, blah. And we'd lay that out. So we were keeping well, I don't think I want to, and because you had to push off. Sometimes people will do that in a church setting where truth will come forward. It requires change. If you want this good thing, then you got to do this behavior. I don't see where I have to run. That church doesn't know. That's a cult. So because we talk about these things, if we, in this kind of setting, a lot of times I get labeled as a cult leader, just in case you didn't know who you're sitting under tonight. So when we're just sharing truth, but truth will force change. Now you'll think, no one can force me to do anything. Here's the problem. Once you know the truth, once you know, you can't not know it, right? So you can say, I'll never come back there again, but too late, you heard the truth. And that will roll around in your subconscious and it will challenge you. Are you sure you should be saying that? Are you sure you should be doing that? Everywhere you go, right? That's what truth does. But also, a lie can do that if it's presented as truth and you can't figure out if it's a lie or truth. That's when you lose sleep at night, right? And then if you have no trust for people, it's even harder to sort out. There's a lot. So I think it's important as we start laying out on Wednesday nights, we're going to be laying out, whether a doctor comes here or I'm teaching on a certain subject or whatever it is, we'll be going down the line and try to do 6 months at a time so you guys can know and you can share it with other people. Hey, this is what we're dealing with on this particular night. But there's not going to be one night that you'll come in and be like, yeah, I know that. Doesn't affect me. I'm God. So sometimes that's why this place is not packed. Because people are like, I don't know if I'm ready for change. And that's okay to take your time on certain things, but other things could kill you. We've lost friends, right? Over fentanyl or these different things. Other things can just take you out. Because it's like, I got to stay away from the truth, because if I know the truth could actually make me free, right? But in order for it to do that, it has to begin to work in there, and you have to be able to have that ability to see. I see into this. I see that there's change. I see this different stuff. So how many of you in the last year have gone through a big change? Yeah, see? Check it out. Check it out. How many of you, the few that are left, went through a change the year before? Now, our ministry right now is in a constant state of change. I can't really find one area where like, oh, that's the same. We've been doing that way for years. No. And I actually see my perception of it, though, is different. Some people's perception of that, like, I just was getting used to that, and now it's making me feel unsafe, where I'm like, ooh, change. That means progress. That means what's going to happen next. It actually is very exciting to me. Yeah? How many of you consider yourself an introvert? That's it. An introvert is usually like, which is exactly, is that okay if I raise my hand? I don't really want to draw attention to myself, right? And how many are extroverts here? Okay. And some of you actually can dance in both realms. See, I am a talk your face off, give hugs, be in there this far away. I'm that person. But then it's like I tell people, when I play hard. But when I rest hard. That's what people will say, oh, you guys went camping. What'd you do? We passed out. And then what'd you do? Got up and got something to eat and went back to bed. And then what? We rode our motorcycle for a little bit and went back to bed. At least for 3 days, we'll just sleep our faces off. Have to get away to be able to do that, though. Hard to do it in your area of routine. So at that moment, like, I'm an introvert. In that moment. But most of the time, I'm extroverted. So introverts and extroverts go through change differently. Introverts can get very upset easy when the change is coming at a faster pace than we'd like to see. Extroverts can ride that wave, but make a mess of things. I just saw looks on faces. That's why I'm laughing. Like, yeah, that's me. So my husband's a good steady, you know, and sometimes I'm the steady for him, like, whoa, 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 whoa. But I do like to ride the wild horse, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, let's go, you know. And I like open fields with snowmobiles. As long as I know it's safe, just open that puppy up. I'm that person, right? But he'll go around, he'll be the person who checks the trail first for my safety while I rev. He's that person. So you can see the difference. But now, to an extrovert and introvert, we go through change. There'll be things that will irritate me more than they'll irritate him. And vice versa, right? So you have a whole family that moves. Not everybody's going to be like, oh. Some people are like, yeah. Next person like, why do we do this? You know, it's going to be like that. Like, is it going to ever calm down? Are we going to come on? You know, there's something, and you have to know that about yourself, how you approach things, right? Because if you don't know that in your approach, you'll think everyone should act the same as you and everyone's going through the same thing. Not so much. Now, I can be that person who can stand at a preschool with 30 kids screaming. I'm fine. I'm that person. My husband, I'll give it a timer, probably 20 minutes. He starts blinking funny. Starts pacing, and he's like, what is it you wanted me here for? What do we... I want to get at the task at hand, because we ran a preschool. And so, you know, he would come in there and I'd be like, I just wanted to talk to you about insurance or whatever. And they're like, rah! You know, and this one's taking a toy and I'm just handling it as we go where our workers are. And he's like, that's a zone. I don't know. I don't know about that, right? Where I'm like, they're having fun. You know, I get excited about that. So, but when I'm done, then I need rest. We have to know these things about ourselves, because a situation that occurs, like we just saw one of the leaders this last weekend when I was up Red Lake, the services were fire. That's all I can say. I'll be explaining some on Sunday. Just like I don't even know how to wrap my head around what happened. Revival fire. So, okay, he got up and shared some things, and he's actually from Iowa, Sioux City, Iowa. And so they drive that far up to Red Lake. I drive almost 4 hours. But he drives a long ways to get up there, and we kind of were doing a tag team thing this time, and made some announcements. He laid out the vision again. This is what we're doing. And then they went home and sent me a picture of their house about to cave in to a big hole. The neighbor's camper gone. What had happened, they lived near a lake, and there's so much flooding going on that the city somehow rerouted where the waters go. And because there's not that many houses where he was at, it wiped them all out. And to come home, though, his wife got there first. He got there in time to save the cat. They lost everything. They have the cat, but everything else is gone, right? So that means your neurons in your brain are like overload. You're like, I need some socks. Well, you don't have any. You know, where's the toaster? I mean, you have no pattern that you can just grab a hold of. That's what just happened. And we're trying to figure out how we can help and what the deal is, right? And so that's absolute change. 2 teenage daughters, absolute change that just happened. And all change demands, all crisis demands change. So you can't go to the same pattern. How many of you, the electricity goes off, you still try to use the microwave? And it freaks you out every time about yourself, like, I just try to put the toast in the, what am I thinking? There's no electricity. But you'll do it almost every time, right? Flick the light, and you're like, oh, oh, that's right, we have no electricity. You know, so it's like the brain is so set up that it has to reroute itself and be shocked by the fact there's no electricity. And it's still not in problem-solving mode, because it's still trying to figure out, well, there's no electricity. You have to come to a place of acceptance that this is what's really happening. There's no electricity. And then people get irritated, depending on if you're an extrovert, an introvert, or just an easily irritated person in crisis mode. right? Some people just don't do crisis well. So that's when you turn the problem solving at other people. You may have been in a house like this. You may have done this yourself. So just sit there and smile, or had this done to you or whatever. It's like, honey, where did you put those candles? Oh, you told me not to buy those candles. You didn't like the smell. I didn't tell you not to buy the candles. We have to have candles for this kind of, And all of a sudden there's attack against each other. It has nothing to do with the electricity. We're freaking out for a totally different reason, right? Because change is happening and we can't grasp what we're supposed to do. So it has to be somebody's fault. And after all, I'm the one trying to save everybody right now. So why did you guys do this? And fights are happening. People are crying. And then it makes the electricity being off a bigger problem than what it really is. Rather than, okay, I can't see you. Are you right next to me? Yeah. Okay. Let's problem solve this. And you're feeling around. Hey, I got my phone on me. Let's, got some battery left on that. Let's turn this or whatever. We'll see what we can find. See what we can do. Let's problem solve this. And it could actually be a laughing moment in that type of thing. It's not high crisis like your house falling into the water or whatever. But big fights happen in times of change. I counsel a lot of people before they get married. And let me tell you, a couple of weeks before they get married, there's some things. I don't even know if I should be doing this. Any fear that you have, all of a sudden, it's got to be problem solved now. Right? And it's someone else's fault. We can't, And so we have to understand that, we're not even looking for options at that point. We're grieving instantly about there's no electricity. It's like, well, there has to be. Your brain says it has to be. That's why you put the toast in the toaster or the bread in the toaster. And then it's like, oh, and then there's more grief that adds to that. There's a loss you're experiencing in that moment. Loss of control, loss of understanding. Like, I thought I understood there's supposed to be like this electricity thing. Like we've had it this whole time. The brain doesn't know how to process that. And it's still not in problem-solving mode. It's still going shock, grief, shock, grief. Right? That's what happens when we go through change. Now, if we know change is coming and we're initiating it, like we bought land, it took us 6-8 months to get that land. It took us 3 years just to convince the guy to sell it to us. So, but we prayed through things and we did certain things. So we already know that change is coming. That was 3 years ago. We already know that expansion is happening or whatever. So you get closer and there's change that happens. Then all of a sudden you close on the land. Okay, but we knew that was going to happen. We talked about it. We prepared. See how that's a nicer deal? Yeah? But what Dennis went to Iowa and found to pull up and try to figure out how to save your cat and just watch everything else go into the water. The house, literally, the picture is the house bowing like this, the garage like breaking right in half, going into this big hole that was created from the water coming through. And you're just sitting there like, that's my house. It's very difficult for the brain to compute that. The reason I'm bringing this up is we've been talking about trauma and the effects of trauma. Okay, so let's say you go through something like that. The difference is usually there's not enough time to process those things one thing at a time. Like, I guess we don't have clothes. I guess we don't have this. I guess it's all at once, and your brain, the processor in your brain can actually not compute. So what I've worked with people on this, because I've had this happen with me and somebody worked with me, is literally part of helping them to problem solve is getting them to do self-talk. You talking with them, and self-talk says this, okay, there's nothing we can do about this right at this moment. We're all safe, right? See how we're backing the train up? So if you're going through trauma right now or the fear of trauma, you've got to give reality checks to your subconscious, or it will set up scenarios in your brain that it'll feel like you're solving world peace and you'll never be able to solve it. No one has yet. So you already know you're probably not that person, that's going to come. But it'll make it feel like it's all on you in that moment, and you have to back it up and actually make things less is more. How many of you have racing thoughts? And once it takes over, you're laying in bed, your breathing changes. That's what brings on panic attack because you're in a constant adrenalized state, right? And then if you have a panic attack and you have a next one the next day, now you're in a condemnatory state of why this is happening to you. There must be something wrong. It just keeps compounding. So you have to catch it at the beginning, or if you've lived with it for a while, come back and give your subconscious a reality check. We are all alive. Thank you, God. This flood just happened, and, I'm taken care of. We might not have anything in this moment, but all we have to do is do the steps that it takes and go through this. We're going to make it. It's going to be okay. There's people who have been through worse. It'll feel like you're lying to yourself. The more fear you have, the more it'll feel like you're lying to yourself. But you need to be around people, too, that'll be like, we're going to take this an increment at a time. All right, let's figure out close. Can we figure out close? That's the state that we're in right now, helping them. Now, a lot of times, if you have the right insurance, they'll just write out a check and say, go get some clothes. Well, I don't know if there's any stores around there with all the flooding that are even open, right? So then it's like, okay, we have the clothes on our back. We're going to be okay with that. We just got to get from point A to point B. Sending something by mail is probably not a good idea. You problem solve. I'm just taking this little thing and this big problem of loss has happened. But you tell your brain, we're going to problem solve this one little step at a time. I have been with a few women over the years that went into absolute panic mode because they found out they were pregnant. And they went from this ditch to that ditch and all these options just grabbing. And people were just like, I don't know what I would do either. And where are you going to get the money? And it just... And so just sitting in the office and bringing them down to less is more. How can we make this less is more? We're not solving world peace. We're going to solve these couple items. And I want you to breathe. Right? Prayer helps a lot too, doesn't it? Presenting truth helps a lot. But if you get around people who they don't know and you don't know and we all don't know, we're going to die. That's what your brain interprets that as. I guess we're on, we're not going to solve world peace. We're a mess up, and then you have to, then this is what the subconscious will do. Well, if this is a mess up, where did we screw up? We should never move from Idaho. See, then you'll go back and start talking trash to everything you've done up until this point. Can't do that. Can't do that. And I shoulda, coulda, woulda. And if we wouldn't have, then this wouldn't have happened. You don't have that much control, first of all. But when you initiate something that you feel is right, you have to stay steady on that path and keep continuing it. What will happen is the distraction will say, we should have never lived there. I should have never had, blah, blah, blah. We should have never went to Red Lake, Dennis could say. If I'd have been there, we could at least got our clothes. Really? Did you know that was going to happen? Did the people next to you know that? They didn't. They lost all their stuff too, and they were there. But your brain will look for a way to spank you. Like, you never listen. It's like, and that's how you got yourself into this. And it will come back and just come at you with every memory of something that did not succeed. So, if you are resistant to a good change, it takes more effort to resist against truth than if you just let it happen. I'm going to need change in this area. No, I don't want to do it. You dig your heels in and you're like, it's this white knuckling and I will argue about this and I'll prove that I'm right. I mean, it's this whole thing rather than saying on things that have happened that I had no control over, or things that have happened that I initiated, or things that have happened that God's trying to give you as a blessing. He wants change to come, but you just can't picture how it's going to happen. There's a point of letting go and receiving it. Okay. All right. It was about 7 years ago, we started Mission 61, and there was one of our first ladies that had come into the housing. She had come from homelessness, felt guilty the whole time she was staying with us, right? Because her subconscious was punishing her for this change. You shoulda, coulda, woulda, now look at this. And she couldn't get off of that and just work on the present. And when you're stuck working on all this, like who screwed this up, and it was my parents, and they should have never, I should have been more prepared, and all of that stuff, it's like none of it matters in the moment, does it? It can't propel you forward. The moment that you have to deal with is right here. Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about that stuff later, but I need to problem solve some things right now to move forward. The fear of the past reoccurring is the thing that won't let us just focus on the change. I have to accept the change. It might not even be your past that you're afraid of. This is what happened to my uncle. Same thing. And you call your aunt, hey, what? When he was going through that, how, like you're trying to research the past to shore up your now. When really it's like whatever was decided wrong or right has already been decided. Yeah. Now we're in the now. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. I have to get hope back in my life. I have to figure out what I'm hoping for. People without a plan have a plan to fail. So I'm not going to make a big grandiose plan. I'm going to make a plan to start taking care of the details. So the same lady, when she moved in, she couldn't get off of this, but she also couldn't move forward because the details were so big, and they remind her of all this stuff. And so we tried to get it to separate away, and let's just go get your Social Security card because you can't have a job without one. But she couldn't get one without an address. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You're like stuck. Ugh, and you want to move ahead, but one thing says you can't do that thing till you do this thing, and you're stuck. But when the motion of it started happening, we're not going to worry about that. Let's just go get your Social Security card. Let's go do this next thing or whatever. It's like, well, it's still such little things are happening. No, you are building a foundation of power. Let's get your food card. Let's get something that says we're trying to accomplish safety. Then you live in that safety and let the change begin to happen. So that's what we had to do with that. Now, there was an initiated change for the second person. There was a second person living in our first Mission 61 home. And she was walking to work and got hit by a car. She said all she remembers is looking up. She's headed to a gas station south of town. And she looked up and saw a lady on her phone, like 5:30 in the morning. Coming around the corner, smash, hit her, just shattered her legs and her shoulder and her arm and all kinds of other things. And she had to make the journey back to be able to walk. That was not a change she initiated. Those types of trauma, it takes a team of people to come around and help you through. It should never be like, it stinks for her. No family, no church, no nothing. And sometimes if you don't have people, you got to go find those people. You got to phone the one friend you have, and let's build a system of people. But when we've had bad experiences of being alone or not having options, our brain doesn't even consider any of that. So part of, for instance, what Mission 61 does is it creates familiarity with people around you. You're not totally abandoned and alone. So just using that as an example. That was a horrible thing that was initiated by someone else, and she had no control over it. Right? So that left a trauma mark. But I will tell you, we worked with that person, and down and saw her at the hospital and prayed over her and stuff like that. She holds a job. She's walking. She's up. But her heart change was I'm going to stay in the now and heal this. That's what I'm going to do. I can't control all this other stuff. But if she'd allow herself to be stuck, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, she might not have made it. So part of what Hope Dealers does is clarifies, if you've gone through this kind of stuff, gives you some information of what's happening to you. One of the most important things when you're going through something is what happens in the subconscious when you can recognize that it's out of control and you're not grabbing a hold of it, is what will come out your mouth is, I don't know. I don't even know what we're going to do. I don't know. How am I supposed to know? And we start talking to each other like that. Well, when the subconscious is doing that, it's your soul literally saying, I actually don't know. It'll check the subconscious with the filing system of any information you have. You've never gone through this before. You might not have gotten the memo that you should have gotten when you were growing up, and you tap in there, nothing there. Or this is a new situation you've never got information on. So when that happens, it'll clarify by saying, I don't even know anymore. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to know? Right? That's the brain's way of saying, I have come to the end of my information scale. And people who pull back and don't get new information, like the word repent means go get new information. It could make you regret the old way you did something, but go ahead and make a change. And it'll cause everything to turn totally around. That's what that means. Right? It's not call yourself bad and hope somebody can forgive you. No, it means, oh, that's what's happening to me. There is a power in figuring out what's happening to you just by going, like tonight, some of you may come in, I don't even know what she's going to talk about. But what I'm talked about up to this point might say to you, oh, that's what I'm going through. Well, how did that help? Well, it gives your mind a reality check. If that's what you're going through, you need new information. Especially if you've said, I don't even know anymore. How am I supposed to know? Well, do you know what I'm supposed to do? Right? Any of those kind of angers coming out, well, then it's like, what are you missing? New information. So don't condemn yourself. Don't let fear take over. Just call a spade a spade. You know what I'm missing is new information. I actually don't know what my options are right now. If I had some options, I got to get somebody to help me with some options because I'm only seeing what I can see. What other options do I have? See that? And all it can take is somebody says, well, here's you can do this, or this is a route you can take. And when I went through it, I did this. I'm not saying any of these things are like a word from God, but what I'm saying is here it is. And all of a sudden what I found is people, even if they don't take those options, a new option will come to them and they see it. And they start working down that project and they start to feel safe again. Then you're first ready to work through any traumas that are happening. Has anybody here ever gone through something, you don't have to share the story, but that shocked you where you could not, when the event happened, the thing happened, your processor in your brain just almost like blacked out. You could not. Yeah, look at. Yeah. And we could do the same thing at Word of Life. 250, 300 people sitting there, hands would be raised all over the place. But here's what I know, is most people won't talk about it. Because what happens when you get afraid is the pullback takes place. You're like, that's why if something shocks you, you breathe in, you don't breathe out. Right? Someone says something to you, you go, you breathe in. That's the shock response. You don't breathe out. And breathing out, you can't talk without air coming out of you. Right? So as soon as you, the brain says, hold that. We can't talk about it. We can't process. There's way too much information. Don't talk about this thing. Where can I go? What medication can I take? I got to go. But we're not actually dealing with, let's break it down and make it less is more. One step at a time. You don't have to solve world peace. And sometimes you just need to hear that so you have permission to know, okay, I'm not that guy. I'm not that chick that has to solve world peace. I just have to make up my mind this change is going to happen and make the best decisions I can. Do you have the options? No, I don't have those yet. But I'm going to go get new information. That's what I'm going to do. Does that make sense? So, I probably have had maybe just in the last couple months like 20 people say, Pastor Mary, I'm just stuck. And that's a descriptive way of saying something that really indicates like you're really saying, I don't have any more information. I'm empty. I ran out. I don't have any options. Right? Because if you know the right options to do and you're resistant to that, that's a whole nother thing. You could be rebelling against truth. You could be like, I know that's the right thing to do, but I'm not doing it. Well, then come back around again, because that's what's going to happen. See, choose life that you might live. Which really covers not just a dying thing. It means I have to keep moving, and I do that by choices. Every step you take is a choice. You, tomorrow morning, for those of you who got to get up in the morning and go to work, that's going to be a choice you're going to make. What time you go to bed tonight, you better choose that right, too. Otherwise, it's going to be harder for you to make the choice tomorrow. Right? I was up with my grandkids till late last night. I was like, I probably shouldn't be making this choice. Payday happened at 6:30 when I was supposed to be out of bed. I was like, Rrr. They were wound, but, But I should have made some different choices. Didn't kill me or whatever. I could live through it. But you make those adjustments as you go. Like, I'll do that this one time, but I'm not going to do that repeatedly because it'll backfire on me. Got to have a certain amount of rest, and so do they. Right? So we're a constant state of practicing something. And here's what I know about the kingdom of God. Just when you think, I got this all practiced out. I could do this with my eyes closed. Kind of like when you go to the bathroom, like I said, it's kind of like I could get out of my bed. Our bed is taller. It's like one of these beds that we question, how long are we going to be able to get up into this thing? Because literally you have to, it's like this, like you're crawling up into this thing. Vern's trying to figure out ways he could like shave it down so it's shorter or whatever, but we're like, we're going to see how long we can do this. So I know what it takes to drop down on the floor, how many steps, I don't count them out, but I just know. It's a subconscious thing, right? And then we got big poles that come off the end of it, so I always go like this, and then I head toward the bathroom. And the better you know that, the more you can stay asleep. Closer to sleep, use the bathroom, get back to bed, and stay asleep. Otherwise, you have to wake up to record everything because it's all new. It's exhausting, So we'll get those patterns, and those patterns is what makes us feel safe. Now, the world system, like what happened with Dennis, that's like a worldly thing. That's the earth that we live in. Said, for you and a few other people, change is coming, right? So where he has control is on making the decisions of what to do with the change. It's not a victim role. It's a powerful role. So he's actually in a state of being powerful by saying, I'm going to get my family to a motel. We're going to make some calls. If we have to get in the car and drive farther out of state to be able to do that, that's the first thing we're going to do. That's power. But when you go through something, here's what goes on in the heart. I just want it all to stop now. Now, it needs to stop now. What are we going to do to make it all stop right now? We need this to all go away. Is that reality? What's real is house is going down, breaking in half. Thank goodness we got the cat, right? That's what's real. So in order for us to come through these things, you can't take the time to grieve at all, right in that moment, your losses or whatever. You get to safety. So you may be in something right now. Safety is very important. A bad relationship, something abusive or whatever. Safety is everything. You can't even problem solve when you don't feel safe. I've shared this before, like when 9/11 happened, 9/11 happened, they were talking about bombs going off, later when they admitted there was bombs in the building. But the people that were coming down the stairs that needed to get out of there were froze to the stair, right? Because what was happening was so shocking, it was so big, they lost their ability to make choice. So they're like holding the rail, just staring. And so officers were running in there, firemen, whatever, were running in there and say, I need you to look at me. Why? Because they lost ability to say, I am in a blowing up building. This is on fire. I have so many feet to get out the door. But they lost the ability to be able to do that. So it took someone else to come alongside of them and say, I need you to look at me. You're going to be okay. What's your name? Right now, The building's blowing up. Well, sometimes it's what it takes. What's your name? My name's Jerry. Okay, come on, Jerry. You're going to come with me, and this is what's going to happen. Someone else actually comes along and takes charge, and they're like, okay, you're making the choices, and then you come down the line, and they bring them out to safety. That's when they first realize, when the adrenaline leaves, that just happened to me. I could have died in there. Right? So what is the church here for? What is counseling here for? What is hope dealers here for? Sometimes it's not so we come in here and just look all pretty while we got all this stuff blowing up and we're stuck. Sometimes when a person's stuck, you look at them, I need you to look at me. What's your name? This is what we're going to do. This is the next action we're going to take. Sometimes that comes through one-on-one counseling. Sometimes it comes through prayer. Sometimes it's just coming alongside and making a new friend. And they're like, here, this is what we're going to do. And when you get that next step, you will sleep better when you're in safety. It's okay. Now, you get to safety. When those people came out of that building and they got them to the hospital or whatever, they passed out, literally. They were describing their neurological state was so overdone. You're like, oh. Is that the time people are like, well, you just need to decide what you're going to do? I mean, come on. You got a college degree. You should be able to decide what you're going to do. No, it doesn't work that way. For one person, they could start making decisions in 2 days. For another person, it might be 2 months. We can't always triage our own healthcare, our mental state. Sometimes you have to come into a class like this or measure it against something, get some help, some therapy or whatever that says, I didn't realize it was that bad off. I didn't realize this was the next thing we were going to do. Thank you so much for helping take charge of that. Now, I'm not everyone's answer, right? I'm not God. I know him. But at the same time, there's something about just having someone who's not presently going through it or who has the training, even if they are going through it, to be able to look at you and say, okay, breathe. Because people forget to breathe. And that might be how simple it needs to start. I need you to stop everything and just breathe. Okay. I'm here. Just stop everything you're doing and just breathe. Get the adrenaline to go down. This is what we're going to do next. And somebody who knows how to make it a little bit simpler, okay? If you're going to a counselor or a therapist who's actually making it harder, meaning that it's like, here's the 14 things we're going to work on right now, and you're like, I'm just trying to figure out the one. Stop. Reevaluate that. Take the power back in your life to actually make that one choice, like, this is what I'm capable of dealing with right now. Right? So you can go ahead and stop the recording. When we do the teaching part of this, many times it goes to facilities and things like that. And, but at the end, I always want to open up for people who want prayer. And if that's not something